gentlemen, and welcome. Before we begin the program this evening, would you please take a moment and either turn off or put your cell phones on mute. And now, if you would, please rise and welcome Zeta McIntyre as she sings America the Beautiful.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains, majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed His grace on thee and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. America, America, God shed His grace on thee and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
Thank you, Zeta. If you would, please be seated. We'd like to welcome you this evening to the 17th Annual Freedom Library Awards Forum. We want to especially thank our sponsors, and we want to thank you for being here tonight. Our sponsors, Yuma Investment Group, United Way of Yuma County, Thomas G. Kelly III Law Firm, Western Financial, Yuma Sun, and the many other sponsors listed in your program this evening. We want to thank them for helping us put on this event and allowing so many to attend without charge. As a special treat this evening, the Yuma Investment Group, which helps families grow and protect their wealth, have a table outside in the lobby, and they would like you to stop by this evening to discuss the purchase or sale of gold and silver coins. As you entered the center tonight, you were probably given a card. If you don't have some, we can get them for you, so that you might write a question or two that our guests will be able to address later on this evening. If you have a question, make sure one of the ushers receives your card later in the program by holding it up, and they will get it to you, from you, and bring it up to the lectern, and your questions will be addressed. We'll try to get in as many questions as possible as time allows. It takes a lot of coordination among many individuals to put on such activities as this, so we want to thank all the individuals listed on the back of the program for their help in putting on tonight's event. Also, if you purchase raffle tickets, don't forget to stop by the table later on this evening on your way out to see whether or not you have won a raffle prize. And now, to explain the Freedom Library Education and Scholarship Program and to recognize its participants, please welcome Mr. Howard Blitz, the founder of the Freedom Library.
Thank you, Bill. Good evening, and thank you for coming tonight. I'd like to thank the Gila Ridge High School and the Yuma Union High School District for allowing us the use of this exquisite venue. So thank you very much. Wherever the people are well informed, they can be trusted with their own government. Enlighten the people generally, and tyranny and oppression of body and mind will vanish like evil spirits at the dawn of day. If a nation expects to be ignorant and free, in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. 3 quotations from the individual who wrote the Declaration of Independence and later became the nation's 3rd president of the United States Constitution, Thomas Jefferson. Over the last 17 years, the Freedom Library has attempted to honor Mr. Jefferson's request and its mission to help individuals understand the real meaning of individual liberty through the teaching of the United States Constitution from the perspective of those who wrote it. 300 individuals have completed the Freedom Library Education Scholarship Program since that time, learning why the U.S. Constitution exists, by whom it was written, and what application, if any, does it have for us today since it was written over 225 years ago. Initially, the Freedom Library Education Scholarship Program consisted of one 12-week class meeting 2 hours every week in the study of the U.S. Constitution. The average class size was around 5, and there was only one $500 scholarship available each year. Since then, over the last 17 years, thanks to people like yourselves here in Yuma, as well as from around the entire country, the Freedom Library was able to offer 3 $1,000 scholarships each semester. This past semester, though, thanks to people like Misha Roth, who facilitated the class, and Doug Henry and the members of the Mohawk Valley Presbyterian Church, the Freedom Library was able to offer the same opportunity to individuals in the East Valley of Yuma County. In addition, again, thanks to the support of you folks and Jim Connolly, who facilitated the class, the Freedom Library is now able to offer a 12-week class in economics, meeting 2 hours each week at the Freedom Library. All in all, the Freedom Library is now able to offer up to 5 $1,000 scholarships every semester. So thank you, Yuma, and thank you, Since 1997, $72,000 in scholarships have been awarded, and the class size has increased to an average of 13. Thank you, sponsors such as Yuma Investment Group, United Way of Yuma County, Thomas G. Kelly of the 3rd Law Office, Western Financial, Yuma Sun, and all of the other sponsors of events like this, and other donors for your interest and support of the mission of the Freedom Library. There are no paid employees of the Freedom Library. People like Misha and Jim donate all of their time, as do the members of the Board of Directors. Thank you to all of you for all of your support as well. Plans are in the works right now to offer this same opportunity to those in Yuma South County in Spanish. Hopefully, in the not-too-distant future, that will take place. There will be an announcement as soon as that program is up and running. Thank you, Luis and Erica Eckley, for volunteering your time to establish this program. I'd like for you to meet the individuals who have taken time out of their busy lives to participate in the Freedom Library Education Scholarship Program, which is free of charge with only a $30 refundable deposit for the textbook. If you're here tonight, when you hear your name, please stand so that those in the audience can see the diverse segment of our population that attends these classes. If I could have the house lights up, please, thank you. The Freedom Library Education Scholarship Program participants in the U.S. Constitution class that was held here in Yuma: Ron Ecker, he's here, Carol Ganser, Ryan Hancock, Monica Houston, Jim Owens, Betty Owens, John Parker, Mary Ashley Robinson, Justin Hamilton Rochester, Gib Rowe, Marlene Rowe, Milton Frederick Westfall. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy lives. Those that attended the economics class that we inaugurated this semester were Stacy Beal, Melissa Garibay, Orlando Garibay, Brian Hancock, Scott Magana, John Paul Plant, Deanne Robinson, Mary Ashley Robinson, Jesus Diego Torres, Tina Wells, Connie Whitner, Bill Whitman. Thank you for you guys. And finally, our brand new class out at Mohawk Valley. I'd like to thank Doug Henry for participating in that event, Elvira Moran, Gabby Moran, Ruth Riesland, Sue Sanders, Jamie Thamel. Matter of fact, I think we got the whole Thamel family here. Jonathan Thamel, Peter Thamel, Timothy Thamel, Carol Tracy, and Frederick Tracy. Thank you. The recipient of the Freedom Library Mohawk Valley Academic Scholarship Award goes to Peter Thamel. Congratulations, Peter. The recipient of the David Blitz, the Freedom Library David Blitz Memorial Academic Scholarship, who attended the U.S. Constitution class, goes to Monica Houston. Congratulations, Monica. Library Sarah Blitz Memorial Instructional Scholarship goes to Milton Frederick Westfall. Congratulations, Milton. I might add, there's two types of scholarships that the Freedom Library offers. One is an academic scholarship that is valued at $1,000, and that $1,000 is sent to the educational institution of the individual's choice. The instructional scholarship is a travel scholarship, actually, where the individual travels and attends a one-week-long seminar put on by the Foundation for Economic Education. The foundation is located in Georgia, and they have seminars all around the country. This year, they happen to have one in our own backyard up in Prescott. So the individuals that will be traveling to Prescott. The recipient for the Freedom Library David Blitz Memorial Academic Scholarship to the individual that participated in the economics class goes to Ryan Hancock. Congratulations, Ryan. The Freedom Library Jim Day Memorial Instructional Seminar Scholarship to the individual that attended the economics class this semester goes to Mary Ashley Robinson. Congratulations, Mary. I ask that all the participants in the Freedom Library Education Scholarship Program who are here this evening to stick around at the end of tonight's presentation for a photo op session with our special guest. Again, thank you, Human Investment Group, United Way of Humboldt County, and all the other sponsors of tonight's programs for your support of the Freedom Library Education Scholarship Program. Now here's Bill to introduce our very special guest tonight. Bill?
Very fortunate this evening to have with us one of the founding fathers, one whose name you may not recall. In a moment, it will still be the 30th of April, but it's no longer the year 2013. It will be 1621. And you will have recently arrived from England in the Virginia colony at Jamestown. It's now 14 years since the first settlers first landed with Captain John Smith in 1607. You, like the others, are seeking your fortune and a new future in this strange land called Virginia. One of the veteran settlers, John Rolfe, the husband of a well-known local girl, has come to greet you and tell you something about the new home that you will be establishing. All right, now you're curious and you don't know exactly what to expect. Here he comes now, Master John Rolfe. Please welcome.
I've not seen your faces before. You must be those off the English ship that docked here this morning. Well, greetings and welcome to your new home in the colony of Virginia. My name is John Rolfe and I've lived here for over a decade. I thought perhaps I might, beyond simply greeting you, tell you a thing or two about this place in the early days, before you got here, in the first several years. And I do that with a particular purpose in mind. The more you know about what is going on at Jamestown in the early days, the better the chance you'll live until next year. I was hoping for a bit more enthusiasm. You do hope to live, do you not? Well, whether or not you hope to live, there are those in England who wish for your survival, your friends and family there that you left. And beyond that, there are others who hope for your survival, and they are the investors of the Virginia Company, who put forth a great deal of money to get you here. And I'll, in a few words, explain their interest in your survival. Corpses work very poorly. We need your labor, your knowledge and skills, talent, experience. All those are in short supply here. So we need you alive. Oh, you can perhaps manure the soil with a corpse, but it is little good beyond that. So we need you alive. And we will do what we can to make that more likely. But you must participate and play your part. You must try to survive. And what is our best tool? Our best tool to survive is, well, it resides here. And our brain, of course, but also the knowledge that resides within our brains. You see, I know some good brains that are not well filled. I want to fill your brain with knowledge not only of successes, of course we all want successes, who does not? But I also want to let you know of failures that you might not wish to repeat. That is the virtue of history. Well, without going too much further, I spoke of your coming to this colony of Virginia and the capital here at Jamestown, of course. Well, our present monarch is James. James Tower, James River. No surprise about that. Our previous monarch in the 1500s was Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen. And thus this place, this great place, claimed for England by Sir Walter Raleigh, for his monarch, Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen. And Virginia, this place, is a rather bold claim. Virginia, according to Sir Walter Raleigh, is all to the north of the Spanish Catholics in the south, in Florida, and up this coast of the Atlantic until you get to the north where the French are, the Catholic French. And we Protestants are between, we English. And Virginia extends from the Atlantic on the east, west as far as the land doth go to the next ocean. All right? So Sir Francis Drake sailed up that coast and claimed this place for England. Now, if you're going to make a claim, make a bold claim. All right? Don't waste your time. And it is rather easy to make a claim. Anyone can say anything they wish. But you must put your feet upon your claim and possess it. in order for it to be something of value. By the way, I'll show you how easy it is to make a claim. I, John Rolfe, I hereby claim the sun. And I'm going to start charging you for the light and the heat you get from me. All right? You see how easy that was? Claims are easy. And this claim of Virginia was claimed by Spain before England. A-J-A-C-A-N, or something like that. A Spanish claim that the Spaniards could not possess. They tried several times and failed. But we English have possessed this now for 14 years, this place. Oh, and the Spaniards, they have a word for you and me from England. Trespassers. But we are determined to trespass. We are determined to trespass. All right? Well, here we are. The first arrival in this place, I should talk about that for a moment. This first arrival was by 3 ships that came 14 years ago. They landed at Jamestown here in May, on the 13th of May of 1607. The Susan Constant, the Godspeed, and the Discovery. Those first 3 ships. Now, every year since that time, ships have come here from England. There are dozens, scores of ships have come here now. But the first 3, in 1607, Captain John Smith was among them. There were about 140 men and boys from England. No women, not at that time. There are women in large numbers here now, but most have arrived here in the last couple of years, 1619, 2021. Only in the last several years have women come in large numbers to this place. First arrival, only men and boys. 140 of them. Only 104 of the 140 stayed as settlers, for some were mariners on the ships. Well, I told you, Captain John Smith was one of those first arrivals here. Let me tell you the name of a settler who has been here many years now, but who was not in the first arrival. This one right here. I, John Rolfe, arrived in the spring of 1610, not 1607, 3 years later. Glad I am I did. I'd rather not tell you this next part. It brings me no pleasure at all. Most of those who came here in 1607, 1608, 1609, well, you've been walking on them today. They're in the dirt by the hundreds all around here. More died than lived in those days. As a matter of fact, of those 104 who began their time here in May of 1607, 6 months later, half were dead. And then it began to get bad. The worst was yet to come. The worst was the winter of 1609 to 1610. They began that winter of 1609 with about 500 settlers. Remember, the ships have continued to arrive here. Do any of you know how many of the 500 survived the winter and were alive in the spring of 1610? 60! 440 perished. Tragic. They were dying of all sorts of things. They died of an illness of one sort or another. Many in the early days had fevers. That was a common thing. Injury killed many. I'll tell you something else. Here's something that killed many. You see, the Powhatan Indians don't care for our claim upon Virginia. They think it has no more validity than the Spanish claim. And their only justification for thinking it is theirs is they've been here for thousands of years. All right, well, so, and you do not need to worry about the hostility of the Powhatan Indians. Not now. Of course, in the early days you would have. You've come at a good time. The reason you need not worry about the Powhatan Indians is, well, my marriage to Pocahontas in April of 1614. For with that marriage, we've had peace. You see, her father was the great chief Powhatan, the great king. I don't like that word chief. When they talk about the leader of a tribe, they don't say chief. They use the word werewolves. Say werewolves.
Werewolves.
You said king. As a Powhatan would say, king. Well, this Powhatan man, the father of Pocahontas, was not the leader of a tribe. He was the leader of over 30 tribes, each with a king. So when he spoke, things happened. So for 7 years we've had peace, but 7 years prior to the marriage there was a great deal of fighting and killing. Many Indians died. So you need not worry about that. But these deaths were from injury and illness and fighting with the natives, but the most common form, the most dangerous and horrid thing that took their lives was starvation. Not enough to eat. How many of you, given a choice, would prefer to eat at least once a week or more? Oh, we're much alike in that way. That's your problem there. They had insufficient food. And what is food? Animals, plants. Dirt won't do you much good. If these early settlers were dying of starvation, there must not have been enough animals and plants in the colony of Virginia. My friends, here's the reality. There are animals and plants in abundance everywhere you turn around here. You're living in the middle of food. It is everywhere. Deer in the forest and turkey. There are plants of all sorts. There's no shortage of food here. Well, how could they possibly starve in the middle of all that food? They found a way, all right? They were not looking for the way, but is that not life? Have you not encountered things you were not looking for? They found a way to starve in the middle of food. One of the reasons that they starved in the middle of all this food was lack of rain. I'll give you that. The Powhatan Indians are farmers, and they were not dying of starvation to the same degree. I'll go beyond that. Lack of rain. Another reason, hostile neighbors. We talked about the Powhatan Indians. That made it difficult to go into the forest and hunt. You might go into the forest and kill a deer and come back, and everyone feasts upon venison. Next time you went out into the forest, you might not come back. Now, your screams might come back for several hours. But if you want to find out about that, ask someone else. I don't want to talk about it. It has something to do with hostile neighbors. All right, they didn't think that the land was ours. So we have lack of rain and hostile neighbors. Another reason they stopped in the middle of food was they'd sent here from England the wrong type of settler. Not for failure did they choose these settlers, but for success. They chose for the wrong reason. When you are going into the unknown, there's a great deal of unknown. And you must speculate and wonder and plan, but at some point you must gamble and go. Have all of your gambles worked out just as you had hoped? All of your choices, have they worked out just as you had hoped? You say, you haven't lived very long. Well, they planned wrong. And the type of settler that they brought here in those early days, we know who they were. Not now, of course, you don't look like gentlemen. Was gentlemen. Gentlemen, 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 gentlemen. Gentlemen, 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 gentlemen. Group of gentlemen traveling together. Laborer might need one of those. Gentlemen, gentlemen, gentlemen. You take my meeting, there were many gentlemen and hardly anything else. They're the type who'd rather not get their hands dirty. If there's work to be done, they'd rather you do it. You know the type? Don't point it at anyone. All right. They were the wrong type. They were sent for a reason. We haven't the time to go into that. I've only planned to talk to you now for about 3 or 4 hours. All right? We do have that long, do we not? No. I must move forward. So they've sent the wrong type of settler. All right? You have lack of rain. You have hostile neighbors. You have the wrong type of settler. Now, let me put the nail in the coffin for you. I shouldn't say that. Take that back. Let me give you the most dangerous reason that they could not survive in the middle of food. The plan they had for feeding themselves was a bad one. Whatever plan you're using seems to be working quite well. But their plan was not so good. Their plan was this. Part of it, not all of it, part of the plan was load the ships in England with stores, sail across the Atlantic, unload the stores over here, and go back for more. How long does it take to sail across the Atlantic one way? It might take 3 months, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months, who knows how long. I've written a poem about the length of time it takes to sail across the Atlantic. Not a good poem, but it is short. And I've memorized this, so I don't want to waste my efforts. Here's my poem. If the wind ain't blowing, you ain't going. That is a couplet, all right, for those of you who like poetry. I don't like poetry, as you can tell. If you don't have a bit of breeze to fill your sails, you're not going anywhere, whether you want to or not. I told you about Captain John Smith arriving here on the 13th of May, in that first arrival here. All right, fine. The 13th of May of 1607. Do you know the date that he left England? He departed England on the 20th of December of 1606. If you wish to know the length of journey, then calculate for yourself. The 20th of December to the 13th of May. Now, with that date in mind, keep this in mind. 6 weeks after Smith and the others left England on the 20th of December of 1606, 6 weeks later, they were still within sight of England. They had sailed hundreds of yards in a month and a half. Is that good? Can you imagine yourself incarcerated in a floating wooden box called a ship in sight of your home for a month and a half? Might that affect your attitude? Might you break into precious supplies on board ship during that time? And then when you get the proper wind, then you make the arduous journey across the Atlantic with your new attitude. My friends, this was difficult. And Smith's journey across was a pleasure cruise compared to mine 3 years later. We won't talk about mine right now. But the reality I wanted you to know. And here's why I bring that up. If you are hungry today, all right, you're here, you're a gentleman, if you're hungry today, will your ship with supplies arrive by tomorrow? Not likely. How about a week from now? How about a month? 6 months? 6 years? 600 years? Heaven knows, there's no possible way to know. So between those arrivals, if the length of time extended long enough, even a gentleman might be inspired to do something and get his hands dirty. Or let us say you went to the river and you caught a fish. You cooked the fish, you ate the fish, and you felt a great deal better. Wonderful. You're fed for a change. You feel so much the better. You feel better until your fellows find out what you did. That breaks the rule. The rule says, all food produced in the colony goes into the common storehouse from which all are fed equally. It wasn't your fish. It was our fish, and should have been subdivided in equal portions by the total number of settlers in the colony. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. There are many settlers. By that number, you divide the fish. And I see something here that might be of value to me. Here's something I can use. No, it isn't. That's not something I can use. I'm looking for something I can use. Well, I'll use this. If your fish is subdivided in equal portions, I think your part of the fish is that size right there. All right, do you see that? Will that much fish keep you alive a long time? Is that much fish worth the labor and the risk of acquiring it? The gentleman said, no, not me. You labor, I'm important after all. But they said that of each other. I'm not going to tell you no one worked. I'm going to tell you that the little work that was done was insufficient for their survival, and so they died in large numbers. You might wonder why did 60 live that winter of 1609 to 10? That would be the miracle to know why did any live at all? Well, one reason, I can give it to you in one word. Charity. Charity from an unexpected source, the Powhatan Indians. and not by any part-time Indians, one in particular, a girl by the name of Pocahontas. When she was an elderly woman, let me tell you, have you heard of the romance between Captain John Smith and Pocahontas? All right. Have you heard of the romance between Captain John Smith and Cleopatra? You haven't? They're both just as likely to have taken place. Neither one did. In 1607, when Smith came here to the colony of Virginia, his great friend Pocahontas was an elderly woman of 10 years. And for some reason, she only aged a year in each year of her life. And during the 2.5 years that Smith was here, 2.5 years, not 10, not 20, she aged 2.5 years. And so there was no romance between those two. There was a friendship of enormous proportions, if you like to eat once a week or more. You see, her father was the great chief who had stores of food, and Smith was leading a group of starving gentlemen. There's the importance of that. Make it not more nor less. But should you work by charity if you don't have to? Oh, come now. You must know the answer. Are they sending the wrong type of settler again? You do know you shouldn't work. You shouldn't live off of someone else if you don't have to. You do know that? I hope. Thank goodness. They sent the wrong type again. Well, all right, you shouldn't live by charity if you don't have to. And how do you get these gentlemen to labor? There are two classic ways. The farmer knows them. The carrot and the stick. Something wanted, something not wanted. All right? The gentlemen and horses are much alike. You need to move one. You can do that. If he's in your way, you can do it with something he wants or something he doesn't want. All right, so these gentlemen were moved first by the stick, and that was done by Captain John Smith. Smith was not the first leader, by the way, of this place. High-born gentleman was, but Smith was not high-born. Smith was born down here. He was a low-born man. When Smith arrived in this colony at Jamestown in 1607, he was in irons. He was in shackles. They were going to execute him. He was a prisoner. He wasn't the leader. A high-born leader by the name of Wingfield was, Edward Moriah Wingfield. Now here's the bad news. Take this to heart. If your leader is a poor leader, if he's insufficient for the purpose, you can be led by such a leader into a grave. It has happened before. It will happen again. Well, many died under him, and many died under the next high-born gentleman, and finally, Smith was brought to lead, and he used the stick. He said, unlike those who led before me, I care not who you are. Whether gentleman, a laborer, a merchant, means nothing to me. If you work not and put nothing in the common storehouse, you get nothing out to eat. He who will not work shall not eat. That brought survival, the stick. But something more. Smith went home after 2.5 years, and other governors ruled, mine by the name of Sir Thomas Dale. Sir Thomas Dale was more severe than any other governor with the stick. But he also said we must use the carrot. And the carrot was this. He said, if you promise not to take from the common storehouse for your needs and your family's needs, then that 3 acres is yours. Do with it as you please, and what you produce, you keep that. If you choose the same, that 3 acres is yours. If you choose the same, that 3 acres is yours. And this was offered to all who would not eat from the common store. And what did that bring? Well, you can only imagine, in one growing season, those who were eating from the common store, nothing had changed. Those who were eating from their 3 acres were well fed. Is this magic? It is human nature. It seems that humans will work harder if they expect. They will profit proportionate to their labor. We don't understand. Too difficult for you. How about if I put it this way? Work more, eat more. Work less, eat less. There's your magic. And back in England, they were heartily pleased to get the good news. They'd been getting wailing and crying and complaints. Now something was working. And so they came forward with their own idea of something called the headright system. And the headright system was this. It was costing the investor 12 or 13 pounds to get one settler over here from England. whether he lived or died. Did they all live? Did we talk about that? That was loss of investment money for the investors. They were looking for a way to populate the colony without spending a great deal of money. And this head-right system was the way. And the head-right system said this: if you pay your own way here, you pay your 12, 13 pounds, you don't get 3 acres of your own, you get 50. I challenge you to find 50 acres for sale in England for 12 or 13 pounds. And it goes further. Pay for another head here to be brought here. A wife, for example, another 50 acres. An indentured servant to work your property with you, another 50 acres. 50 acres each one. And my friends, now we've lost something. There's something we don't have anymore. We do have land that is privately owned by almost everyone. And now we don't have any more starvation. If you wanted to starve, you've come too late. Sorry, all we have is abundance now. Well, there we are. We found a way to stay alive. And just as a body can die, I know my time is short, is it not? Well, just as a body can die from lack of food, so too can an enterprise die for lack of its food. And the food required by an enterprise is something called profit. You can't feed your business loss forever or it starves. The Virginia company was starving for lack of profit. They were not making their profit. And they were looking for gold and silver. They had found none among the Powhatan Indians, and they were going to abandon this place. Can you imagine that? After all the death and trial and the pain and loss of life, finally they were going to give it all up, give all of North America up, and let the Spanish or the French or the Dutch have it? Well, John Rolfe said, don't abandon. You lack perseverance. I found your gold and silver. Golden leaves. They grow green and they dry golden brown. You know what I'm talking about? Tobacco. I'll give you another word for tobacco. Profit. One more word for tobacco. Life for the colony rather than death by abandonment of the colony that was imminent. And we've not abandoned. One last thing I'll say, and then I'll stop talking. And that is, tobacco is a crop native to America. Before Christopher Columbus sailed here for Spain in 1492, there was no tobacco in Europe, only among the native people there, all over America, as a matter of fact. Well, in a like manner, we English have brought here and planted an English seed. Unique, it is. You may not know the name of it. The General Assembly. The General Assembly is the governor, the governor's council, upon which I sit. I, John Rolfe, sit on the governor's council of state, and the elected. I said elected burgesses. You know, we're not Spaniards or French. There's no election in Paris, France. There's no parliament in Madrid, Spain. Only in England have we conducted ourselves and our government in a particular way for a long time. You must go back to 1215 for that. At a place called Runnymede, good King John was approached by his loyal subjects, and he was told, King John, you're a great English king. And you'll remain an English king who happens to have a head on his shoulders, without having it severed off right now, if you sign this great charter, this Magna Carta. And for some reason he signed. And within that charter was the seed of something called Parliament. And Parliament is nothing more nor less than we subjects electing our own and making our own laws. We help our kings in England. We insist that you'll help. Well, there it is, enough. I've talked way too long, and there's so much more to tell you. You'll learn as time goes on here. But I do want to say we wish you good health and long life. Many have not had that, but you have a better chance because you know a bit of history. We wish you prosperity and good fortune. Now, since tobacco, that is not an idle wish, that is something you can have. And we wish you finally perseverance, for with your perseverance and your hard work and mine, there might be a colony of Virginia next year, and the next year. We want there to be a Virginia in 100 years, and 1721, if you can imagine the future, that far into the future. And if I should see you this time next year, I truly hope that you're alive and above ground. With that.
Thank you, Mr. Rolfe, for giving us a glimpse of life in the 1620s in Virginia. We now have the pleasure of hearing Mr. Jacob Hornberger. Jacob Hornberger is the founder of the Future of Freedom Foundation, located in Fairfax, Virginia. He was born and raised in Laredo, Texas, and received his BA in economics from Virginia Military Institute. He received a law degree from the University of Texas. He was a trial attorney for 12 years in Texas. He was also an adjunct professor at the University of Dallas, where he taught law and economics. In 1987, Mr. Hornberger left the practice of law to become director of programs at the Foundation for Economic Education. He has advanced freedom and free markets on talk radio stations all across the country, as well as on Fox News' Neil Cavuto and Greta Van Susteren shows. And he appeared as a regular commentator on Judge Andrew Napolitano's show, Freedom Watch. Here tonight to discuss economic solutions to economic problems of the present day, please welcome Mr. Jacob G. Hornberger.
It is great to be with you tonight, back here in Yuma. It's actually my second time to Yuma. I came in 2002 to participate in one of Howard's programs, and it was a fantastic experience. And I got to say, Howard, it's great to be participating in your program again. Howard, I got to tell you, in the freedom movement, he is an inspiration to so many of us. The work that he's done educating young people on principles of free market economics is just it's an absolute inspiration. And it's an honor to be participating in this program, especially the scholarships that are being awarded to all these students. It's great to be here, so thank you very much. It's also close to be sort of like back home in a way, near the border. At the Future of Freedom Foundation, I sometimes get letters from people saying, you know, we've got to do something about these immigrants because they're coming in America and they're polluting American culture. And I was right back and I said, oh yeah, well, like what culture exactly are you referring to? Are you referring to the culture in Manhattan, or the culture in New Orleans, or the culture in San Francisco, or the culture in my hometown of Laredo, Texas, which is, unlike Yuma, right on the border. And you know, I spent 25 years of my life in Laredo, and I explained to them what life is like in Laredo. You know, because the borderland is just totally different from everywhere else. You go into Laredo and the store, you go into the stores and half the signs are in Spanish and half in English. And I recently went into a Walmart, and there's a lady greeting people, and she can instantaneously size up as to whether she should say buenos dias or good morning, just by looking at the person. And the street signs are half of them are Spanish figures and Mexican heroes. And you go into McDonald's, and 80% of the conversation is in Spanish. And in Laredo, we celebrate George Washington's birthday. We have the biggest celebration in the country celebrating George Washington's birthday. I love the border regions, and I grew up there. And interestingly enough, when I was growing up in the 50s, the Census Bureau had this distinction that awarded that it was the poorest city in the United States. And wow, they awarded that to Laredo. This is on a per capita basis. So, you know, I'm a kid and I'm saying, wow, I'm growing up in the poorest city in the United States. And I was blessed. My dad was a lawyer, but I knew there was a lot of poor people in Laredo. I saw them in elementary school and junior high, went to public school, and you could see poverty. But that hit me as a kid. Wow, poverty is an interesting thing. thing. And, you know, that in Laredo, you've got the downtown area that's actually connected by the bridge. At that time, there was only one bridge, to the downtown area of New Laredo. And so it's really like one great big metropolitan area that's separated by a river, the Rio Grande. And, well, when we go over to New Laredo, you know, as a kid, and sometimes in high school, sneaking across one nightclub, you know, without parental permission, there's one thing that you'd notice immediately, and that is that as poor as Laredo was, it was nothing compared to New Laredo. I mean, you could just see it, the starkness, the poverty, the people, the way people dressed, and you go into residential areas and see, you know, shacks, paper, cardboard. It's incredible. But nobody ever asked the question, including me, is how come that you've got this metropolitan area, you got half, so sort of like East St. Louis and West St. Louis, but one half is like so much more poor than another half. I mean, is this because of something in the Rio Grande or what? But nobody ever asked the question. It was just sort of like, you know, that's the way life is. Well, then in the 1960s, a native Texan assumes the presidency, Lyndon Johnson, and he decides to wage war on poverty. And guess what he does with Laredo? He makes Laredo a model city, you know, in his war on poverty. And I'm struck by this because my dad was a Democrat, active in the Democratic Party. So as a kid, I was campaigning for Kennedy and Johnson. Passing out leaflets and brochures, and I had a Kennedy Johnson button. I actually went to the Johnson Ranch for a political barbecue and shook hands with Lyndon himself. And after, you know, he's elected in 64, my dad related to me that he calls the mayor, who was a good friend of his, and says, Joe, the spigots are open. Just tell me how much money you want, and it's going to come into Laredo to help you guys out. So, man, the money flowed in. You got grants for your community and public housing projects. And, man, I mean, all I could think about was, this is fantastic. I mean, this is the way you beat poverty. And there wasn't any doubt in my mind. I didn't know anything better than that, anything different. And so, you know, I go to law school. I come back to practice law with my dad, and nothing's changed for me. And I become the local representative for the American Civil Liberties Union. I'm on the local board of trustees for the Legal Aid Society, which is a government board that provides free legal assistance to the poor. And so I'm rolling along thinking, yeah, man, no doubt in my mind that this is what you did. In fact, I couldn't believe anybody would question government helping out the poor. I mean, that's like, what is wrong with that person? And then one day something happened. And I'm sitting out at the detention center a couple miles outside of town. The detention center is where they were incarcerating all the illegal aliens. And I knew illegal aliens. I mean, I grew up with the illegal aliens. I grew up on a farm on the Rio Grande. My dad had it as a hobby. We grew crops and we baled hay and we had a few cattle and we had orange trees. And so we had illegal aliens, because it wasn't illegal to hire them at that time, working on our farm. And so these guys were my buddies. I mean, you know, my two brothers. I mean, we played football with them after work. And they were the hardest working people I've ever seen in my life. I mean, talk about a work ethic, and they were family-oriented and sent their money back to their wives and their children, their mothers and fathers. And they had the traits that society would, I think, you know, would hold very dear, very important. And I'd eat dinner with them sometimes, you know, of course, my brothers and I. And I'm sitting at the detention center because I'm representing a couple of these guys that were charged with illegal entry. And I see all these guys walking around. It was a weird place, like a concentration camp. You got, you know, a chain link fence and barbed wire on top and stuff, guard towers. And it just hits me. These are the poorest people you'd ever find in life. I don't think you'd ever find poor people in illegal aliens. And I asked myself, how is this possible? I mean, the whole concept of the war on poverty, the welfare system, the public housing. My grandfather had established the first public housing project in Laredo back in the Roosevelt administration during the New Deal, who, of course, had inspired Lyndon Johnson. And I said, well, how do they reconcile this with this treatment of people that just want to work? That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to come in and make a deal with an American employer, work, and sustain their life, better the lives of their families. And I said, something's not clicking here. And so I went and talked to some of my friends. A good friend of mine on the Legal Aid Board of Trustees. And I said, hey, what do you think about this? You know, we've got all these systems to help the poor, and you're jailing these guys for wanting to work, and gave me the same response that everybody did. They broke the law. The law's the law. Well, by this time, my mind's starting to work. The gears are starting to go. I'm starting to think. I'm starting to question and starting to doubt things. And I said, well, yeah, but segregation was the law too. That maybe the law might be wrong, And I'm bothered by this. I'm struggling with it. And nobody can provide a good answer for it. And so finally, I started looking. And I started looking at books. And I come across a book that was published in 1776. In the same year that the Declaration of Independence was signed. And the book is called An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations. And it was written by a Scottish philosopher named Adam Smith. And the book was a very turgid read, very difficult. A difficult time getting through it. Didn't understand a lot of what he was saying. So I went to commentaries on the book. And I surrounded myself with volume after volume of commentaries, figuring out what Smith was saying. Because you see, Smith wasn't asking, notice from the title of the book, Smith isn't asking, what are the causes of poverty? Johnson and Roosevelt were asking so forth. He was saying, poverty is the natural state. Throughout history, people have been poor. He wanted to know, what is it that makes certain nations wealthy? Whoa, hey, that gets close to home with Laredo and Nuevo Laredo. Why is one country wealthier than another? I mean, is it education? Is it natural resources? Smith says it's none of those things. Smith's idea shocked the world. In fact, to this day, Smith's idea shocked me. It shook my whole worldview of everything that I had believed in since I was a kid. Smith says the reason that mankind has been mired in poverty and stayed in poverty is because governments have waged war on poverty. And to the extent that government is prohibited or limited from waging war on poverty, that will be the prosperous nation. That's a mind blower, especially for a guy that's grown up with the exact opposite idea. It's a shocker. And here's what he said. This is what his reasoning was. That if people are free to keep everything they earn, if enterprise is liberated from government taking care of people, watching over people with anti-profiteering laws, anti-speculation laws, and the like, welfare laws, that people in the private sector, as poor as they may be, as struggling as they may be, have a tendency to start saving money. And that money goes into a bank, is available as capital to be loaned out to a businessman, maybe their employer, that buys equipment that makes the worker more productive, and that increase in productivity then increases the standard of living for everyone, including the worker. Let me give you a simple example. Suppose you got a farmer, and he's hired 10 guys to plant lettuce. And all they have is hose. And they're over there tilling the field and so forth, and they produce, let's say, 1,000 heads of lettuce. And out of that, they're paid, $1,000 each per year. Extremely poor society. But out of that $1,000, those workers save $100. Everyone on that farm, along with all the other farms. Put that money in the bank. A few of the farmers say, hey, goes to the bank and says, hey, I'd like to borrow some money here to buy a tractor. And the banker says, I just happen to have the money. Your workers are depositing some of their savings, all the other workers are too. Here's your money to go buy the tractor. He buys the tractor, he brings it back, he tells his workers, forget the hose, use the tractor. They use the tractor, and all of a sudden, instead of 1,000 heads of lettuce, now they got 20,000 heads of lettuce that are being produced. Increasing the revenue for the farmer. And therefore, raising standards of living for people, more food available for people. But what about the workers? Smith says, you don't need to worry about, you don't need to depend on the benevolence of an employer. He will be forced to pay higher wages simply through market conditions. Because there's a lot of businesses that are now booming. The tractor business is booming, and they're going to start bidding workers away. And they bid them away with higher wages, just through the market process. That's another shockaroo for me. Because I've always been taught that the only way that protects the workers is minimum wage laws, where the government's taking care of people, watching over people, and making sure the workers aren't exploited. I mean, that's a no-brainer, right? Minimum wage laws help the poor. Until I started doing more exploring, and I realized, figured out, it's the exact opposite. Minimum wage laws are the biggest attack on the poor you'd ever find. How's that work? Well, assume you got a minimum wage of $100 an hour. It's pretty easy to figure that one out. That every employer is going to put a value on the worker's labor before he hires him. So say, well, is he worth $100 to me? And if he's not worth $100, and not a lot of people are worth $100 in the labor market per hour, he's not going to hire him. And so you lock out of the labor market everybody whose labor is valued at less than that minimum. And it applies at $7.50 an hour or $10 an hour. There's a certain group of people in the marketplace whose labor is valued at less than. And what happens to those people? They're locked out of the labor market. You've got a black teenage unemployment rate in the inner cities of 40%. Hispanic teenager unemployment rate 20%. Because their labor is not valued at that minimum. And even if they come to an employer, a black teenager in Harlem, and says, I will undercut the guy you're hiring. I'll work for $4 an hour. I want to learn a business. I want to learn a trade. I want to learn a work ethic. I want to learn enough where maybe I'll go start my own business and compete against you. I want to get my foot in the door. The employer says, I can't do it. It's illegal. If I get caught, they'll put a triple fine on me. I'm not going to do it. So what do they tell these black teenagers? Go on welfare. We take care of you. We love you. And some of them stay there for life. Now, I learned another thing that shocked me as I started doing this exploration. I learned that there had been a society in history that was totally unlike any other society that I'd ever heard of. Nobody ever told me about this society. I was an economics major in college. Nobody ever told me that there was a society where there was no income taxation, no internal revenue service, no minimum wage laws, no economic regulations to speak of, a few, no Social Security, no Medicare, no Medicaid, no immigration controls, no standing army, no military-industrial complex, no CIA, no welfare state, no warfare state. That was a shock to me, to find that such a society once existed. Now, if we look at our society today, we see that that's not exactly the kind of society in which we live, like that previous society. In fact, we live in a society where it's really the exact opposite. The government effectively controls everybody's income. We call it national income. Effectively, income has been nationalized. The Congress decides how much of your money you're going to be permitted to keep, and how much the government is going to take to give to others, to finance its operations. They make the decision on that. So this notion that previous society had, where you make it, you keep it, it doesn't apply. And there's mandated charity in this society, which is a phenomenal notion. You know, I mean, I grew up believing that this was all proper because, you know, especially as Christians, you know, we know the commandments. We know that the second greatest commandment is, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And it's just like the first one, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, thy soul, and thy mind. And so we're all inculcated with the notion that when the government has these social welfare programs, this reflects that we're a good, caring society, that we're all compassionate. And then as I started going through this thought process, I started to suspect that maybe that's just not the case. Because you see, it's all founded on force. And to me, it's almost like maybe a rebuke of God. Because you see, God says, these are my commandments, but I'm not going to force you to follow. You decide for yourselves whether you're going to follow. Well, I can follow. It's the way to me. But choice is yours. I'm not going to force you to make the choice. It seems to me that with the welfare state, people are saying, Lord, I think you may have made a mistake here. Hey, everybody makes mistakes, Lord, But if you had known that people can't be trusted with that kind of freedom, you would have never vested in them in free will. And that's the fact, is that you can't trust people to care for their parents. You can't trust people to care for the sick and the elderly and donate to charities and build the churches and the universities and the schools. People won't do that, Lord. They'll exercise their freedom to be selfish and self-centered. But we fixed the mistake because we've created a system where everybody is now going to be subject to majority rule and has to participate in the system. And oh Lord, if they don't participate, if they refuse to participate, we send them to jail. And so we've corrected your mistake in a system of collective force, where everybody's got to participate and take care of their parents with Social Security and Medicare, and take care of the poor with Medicaid, and farmers with farm subsidies, and dictators with foreign aid. And we've done it. And then you've got this whole regulatory idea, and minimum wage laws and so forth. Government taking care of people, and on the forward side, policing the world. Totally different from that society I described. Now, interestingly enough, we're besieged by crises. Everywhere you look, there's a crisis. Social Security crisis, Medicare crisis, healthcare crisis, terrorist crisis, dollar crisis, drug war crisis. Everywhere you look. And there's a common denominator here. Immigration crisis, right? There's always an immigration crisis. Ever since I was a kid, there's an immigration crisis. What's the common denominator? The common denominator is the federal government, the system. And you see, but the idea is, we can fix this. We all just come up with a plan. We can fix this crisis. We can fix that crisis. And yet the crises always continue. On all these programs, there's always a new crisis. No matter what law they pass, it makes it worse. And so what I'm suggesting is that maybe there's causation here. Maybe it's not just correlation. Maybe the crises are a result of the system itself. And so people say, well, okay, Jacob, what's your solution? How are we going to save Social Security? How are we going to save Medicaid? And how can you make us, show us how to fix this drug war that's been waged since you were practicing law 40 years and 30 years ago in Laredo? How do you fix all these things? The immigration crisis. But you see, the assumption is that the system under which we're living can be fixed. What if it can't? I mean, what if it's a bad system? If you got a bad tree that bears bad fruit, I don't care how much you water that tree and how much you prune the branches, it's still a bad tree. And so, what am I proposing as a solution? We're not going to come to you tonight and throw out the standard stuff that's thrown out, we got to rein in federal spending. I mean, they're spending $1 trillion more than what they're bringing in taxes. And we all know that that's going to be added to the debt. And they're going to raise the debt ceiling again, even though the debt ceiling is an acknowledgement that too much debt is a bad thing. And they just keep doing this year after year after year. And we see the signposts. We see Greece. We see Cyprus. Signposts like warning, warning, warning. This is the road you're headed down. You're headed down national bankruptcy. You're headed down internal collapse, like the Roman Empire, the Soviet Empire, the British Empire. And I can say, okay, well, the solution to that, we need to rein in federal spending. Or we need to do a medical IRA. That'll fix it. Or raise the retirement age and Social Security. I'll call this tanker. But I'm not going to do this. This is the way I figure. You guys that paid $5 for this program, you're entitled to get your money. Okay? I'm going to take you to a higher level. I'm going to challenge you with something much higher and hopefully more profound for you to contemplate, reflect upon, and just think about it. This is my proposal. A total separation of economy and the state. Just as our ancestors separated church and state. I mean, look at the religious field. We see scandals, we see sex abuse, we see corruption, we see people don't send their kids to church, people don't go to church, and yet there's nobody, as far as I know, that ever said, we need to put government in charge of the churches. I mean, if somebody commits a crime, we prosecute them, or if they defraud somebody, we sue them. But nobody's saying governments need to start regulating the churches, taking control and issuing regulations of what's going on in there. Nobody does that. Because it's inculcated in us, because it's a great gift from people 250 years ago that said, separate the two activities, religion and the state. And nobody says, hey, we need to build the churches for the poor, because the poor don't have a place to go to church. You know? Nobody says that. Okay, that's what I'm suggesting for economic enterprise. Same thing as with religious activity. No state involvement. Okay, now what does that mean as a practical matter? It means that people will be free to engage in any economic enterprise free of government control. Free enterprise. No licensing, no permits. You want to open a business, you want to go into a trade or occupation, you open up. Consumers decide whether you're going to stay in business. And you keep everything you earn. And you can trade with anyone else. You want to go to Cuba and trade with Cubans? Great. It's your business. It's your money. You want to hire people from other countries? Your business. Your money. Total free enterprise. Enterprise free of government control. Now, what would that produce? I would suggest that it would produce the most dynamically prosperous society with this massive accumulation of capital that would be taking place in the private sector. That the expenses for government that would no longer be charged with taking care of people and policing the world would be minuscule. And that you'd have this massive accumulation of capital taking place in the private sector that would raise standards of living, especially for the poor, that we can't even imagine. And that it would nurture, encourage the values that we all hold dear. Caring and compassion that come from the voluntary, willing heart of the individual, not through the coercive apparatus of the government. I mean, isn't that what caring and compassion really means? And especially in the eyes of God, is when it comes from the willing heart of the individual. And so people would be free to make these choices. But I would suggest that this is the key to wealth, prosperity, higher standards of living, moral principles, and the principles that we hold dear. Responsibility. You make a mistake, you bear the consequences. People will be more cautious about making mistakes. To me, this is the key. And this is the debate that I suggest should be going on in America today. Is the system under which we're living, the welfare state, the warfare state, is that a turn that was for the better for this country? And you see, because out of crises come opportunities. We have an opportunity to do a lot of soul searching. We got to be asking ourselves important questions, just like the founding fathers did, who were regular people like you and me. What does it mean to be free? What is the role of government in a free society? What does free enterprise really mean? And is freedom measured by the extent to which government is taking care of people and policing the world? And so all these crises present us with an opportunity to do the soul searching, to ask these profound questions, and to decide where we want to lead the country, where we want the country to go. And remember, it's just like going to a doctor. If you misdiagnose the problem, your treatment's going to be depending on that, and very well may affect the future of the body politic. I'm suggesting that we have an opportunity to lead this country out of the sludge in which we're mired and build upon the principles of freedom on which this country was founded, and leave not only a great gift to future generations, as people did when they separated church and state did for us, but we not only lead our country to the highest reaches of freedom, we lead the world at the same time by example. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rolfe and Mr. Hornberger. I guess we all notice similarities. In the 1600s, the farmers learned that if they tilled their own crops and were, as a result, received the fruits of their own labors, they prospered. And if they depended on a common, or what we would call government welfare, they didn't do well. And the same thing today. You know, Mr. Rolfe, you mentioned that you had a couplet. And the couplet was, if the wind don't blow, the ship don't go. We have a couplet here in Yuma as well. As a matter of fact, the couplet is one of our sponsors' couplets. And I'm going to give you half of it, and the audience will give you the other half. I don't get paid until you get paid. That's one of our sponsors. Well, I'm giving them a plug that week. What can I tell you? We have, this is a question and answer time. We'd like to engage you if you have some questions. Howie, do we have any cards?
Not yet.
We don't have any cards.
There was one question.
You have a question? Okay.
I'd like to pose to Jacob, and I don't know, maybe Mr. Rolfe can chime in on this, but there was a question earlier today about the robber baron era, which was the early 1900s, and how that all kind of jived or coordinated with being the free enterprise system. Can you address that?
Yeah, it was a great question. It actually, there's another part to it where people, he was asking about, you know, the difficult conditions during the Industrial Revolution, and people sending their wives and children into the factories working long hours and stuff. And of course, we're all taught this in economic history classes, and the more study I did on it, I realized how fallacious this thinking was. First of all, notice the implication that Americans were bad spouses, bad husbands, and bad parents. That would do the dastardly thing of sending their kids into factories and working in long hours, and their wives, and the implication is that the law was necessary to protect people from these bad, Americans who would do this to their spouses and kids. Well, as I started studying this subject, I realized how fallacious this was, that when people were sending their kids into the factories with their wives, it was a very rational decision. Because remember that things were very, very poor. And remember what Smith says, that mankind's been mired in poverty. And the reason that you would send your kids into the factories is what the alternative is. That if the alternative is that your kids and your wife are going to die of starvation, as John Rolfe pointed out, then it's not even a real choice. If the way to save them from that starvation is to send them into factories, that's what you're going to do. And then it wasn't, and that's why people were working the long hours to try to survive, because the level of capital was very, very low compared to where it is today. As capital started rising, that's what took the kids out of the factories. It wasn't the law that did it. Because if people are faced with breaking the law to save their kids, or obeying the law and seeing their kids die of starvation, we all know what choice they're going to make. Now, but the point about the robber barons is very interesting, because the late 1800s was a period of crony capitalism, much as like we see today with the bailout of Wall Street firms and the coziness that exists between Wall Street and the government. And there was a lot of that going on in the 1800s. It was what we call corporatism, and where the little sweetheart deals. And that's not free enterprise. That's not the free enterprise that we talk about. We're talking about enterprises free of these type of government business partnerships. Now, having said that, there were some heroic people in this period that they call robber barons. There was a guy that had a railroad. I think his name was Hill. And he was the only railroad guy that refused government grants. All the other railroads were taking government grants, and this guy had a principle said, no, this is wrong. I'm not going to do this. And he, despite the fact that he was totally on his own without government grants, was out competing all the other railroads in terms of marketing. He provided a better service because he wasn't complacent and so forth. And now, in defense of the so-called robber barons also, these were the guys, John D. Rockefeller and so forth, who were building the museums. They were building the universities. And they weren't doing it for an income tax deduction because there was no income tax. And so when people were free to accumulate unlimited amounts of wealth, that's where the churches were being built and the museums and the opera houses and so forth.
Mr. Rolfe, did you also find in your time that as the individual prospered, the community prospered?
Prospered to the extent that the colony continued to exist as opposed to disappearing. Prospering is a good thing. Survival is even more important. And survival was only made possible when we were free to do as we chose.
Thank you. Mr. Hornberger, you were describing a society where there was no SEC and no IRS and so on and so on and so on. What society was that?
Which society was that?
Could it be the United States?
Yeah, that was America. And nobody ever taught me that. If you take, for example, the period from 1880 to 1900, is the most unique society in history. Now, it didn't apply to everybody, as we discussed last night in the meeting. There was a small group of people that it applied to. But it was a remarkable, it was a strange, bizarre society. No income tax, no IRS, no regulations, no SEC, DEA, OSHA, immigration control, no public schooling systems. I mean, whatever one might say, that is different. That is a different society. And what's fascinating is Americans at that time, that's what they considered as freedom. That's the way they defined themselves. They said, this is what makes America exceptional. We're not like everybody else. This is what makes us different. And this is what makes us free. As compared to what's very interesting today is how Americans consider themselves free, but who really live in a very opposite system.
Thank you. Mr. Rolfe, maybe you could bare your soul for us for a moment. How did you and Pocahontas fall in love? And did that save Virginia?
Well, Pocahontas, after the departure of Captain John Smith from the colony, had little to do with the English. She lived among the native people, one of her father's tribes by the name of Patawoma. Heard of a river by the name of Patawoma? Well, she had little to do with us and was taken prisoner, captive, I should say, by Captain Samuel Argyle and brought to Jamestown without the orders of the governor. The governor said, why have you captured this girl? We think she's wonderful. She saved the colony in the early days. He said, well, her father has a number of English captive and English weapons. I thought you might want some to trade. So here's his daughter. She was sent to live with Reverend Alexander Whitaker, my minister. And she was being held there, taught more of English and how to dress in cloth as an English woman would dress in cloth. And I was put together with her to assist her. I'm one of the few educated in university and prior to coming here. So hearts entangled in such a way that we could not separate them. And it was not a plan, it was not intentional. The colony, as a result of our marriage, has had peace, but your security and peace was not on my mind at all. It was not my purpose. So that is the short story.
Thank you. Thank you.
Could I?
Sure, yes, yes.
Mr. Rolfe, I was very intrigued with your comments and very impressed. And I'd like to, I don't mean to necessarily put you on the spot, sir. Okay. Well, you mentioned that your primary product in the colonies was tobacco, and I got the impression this sort of saved the colony. And you got all these people here that just arrived on the ship, including a lot of young people on the ship. And I'm wondering whether you would advise them to purchase this product and consume this product that you say is necessary to save the colony.
Well, as most not living beyond their 30s and 40s, I hope to enjoy life on
I would ask this question of each of you briefly. How important is the profit motive for economic prosperity for individuals?
there is a carrot and a stick that causes us to do what we do and not do what we do not do. Without a profit, there is little to encourage us to action. As I said before, am I not being heard? No.
Profit is the encouragement that humans need to cause them to do the right thing. It proves to them that what they've done is worth doing again. So I do not think that you can have a prosperous society without the reward that comes naturally from one's production.
I would add to that when people seek profit, the only way they can do this in a free market is by providing them a good or service that people want. That's how you get wealthy. I mean, look at Bill Gates. Bill Gates seeks a profit. Let's say he's the most selfish guy in the world, which we all know he is, and he gives a lot of his money away. But look what he's done for the rest of us. I mean, you know, the whole computer industry, the software industry. I mean, so this is what one of the ideas that Smith had, is that when people seek their own self-interest, they inevitably benefit mankind, even if that's not part of their intention. And we receive the benefits. We all do as consumers of people that are trying to serve us, get wealthy, but serve us by giving us goods and services that we want and are willing to pay for.
Thank you. The microphone doesn't work. If economies are detached from government and politicians can no longer hand out spoils, what do you envision government would look like? What functions would they serve? How would they receive any income?
I think government having its three necessary functions. One is to serve as a police force to protect us from the violent people in society. Murderers, rapists, thieves, and so on. But otherwise, leaving people alone to make their own choices, even when those choices are not very popular, or considered irresponsible, or dangerous, or a lack of compassion. That's one. Two, to provide a judicial system where people can resolve disputes peacefully, where there's not shootouts in the streets, when somebody gets in an automobile accident. People can sue and resolve disputes. And three, to protect the nation from invasions. That doesn't mean going abroad. I mean, my model is in the model that actually our founding fathers pointed to was Switzerland, which is genuine national defense. You know, not going abroad in search of monsters to destroy, but really oriented toward national defense. Now, the interesting question is, how do you fund that? Well, you know, America was founded on a system of no income taxation, but those are very, very minor functions, because now you got the states are handling the criminal laws essentially. So you got very minor functions for the federal government, and they used indirect taxes like tariffs. My own personal preference is let people voluntarily fund government. I mean, that way, just like they fund the churches, I think enough people believe that government's important that they don't need to be forced to do it. But the second best is make it an indirect tax where you don't have the IRS threatening people and coming into their books and records and having to keep deductions and all that nonsense. I think that was a great model. I think that's the model we ought to be building.
Mr. Rolfe, you had a government. How did you fund it?
Well, when the profits were not to be found before tobacco, when there were no sufficient profits, they tried all sorts of things, and the money was not there. So the answer was, for those who were talking about abandonment, it was, don't have the government here. Don't have government you can't fund. That was the idea. They were going to simply abandon North America when there was no profit. When we found the profit, of course, we stayed here. And that has been a fortunate thing, for we've kept our little elected parliament and so forth, called the General Assembly. And I know in future that will be of great importance to everyone here. But I think the comments made by this gentleman here are quite well taken, that government has little to do with the advancement of society other than the protection from criminals and those who might invade. The Spanish, of course, would like to have Virginia. French and the Dutch also, I might add. So protection in that way, and disputes. For the General Assembly serves also as a court. It functions legislative and judicial purposes.
Were they volunteers? Were they paid, or were they just for the benefit of the community?
There was a small amount to be contributed by each in the community for the pay for this small government, but it was not a large thing. And should there be a need for an army, here we are. We all come forward as the militia.
Thank you. Our founding fathers envisioned that government would be served by individuals who would leave their private businesses, serve for a time in government, and then go back to their private businesses. And now it seems that we have career politicians, 30 and 40 years in government. Would you be in favor of term limits?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. The simple answer is yes, but I don't think that's really a substantive solution. Getting new people in office doesn't change the system itself, and that's why I think it's more important to focus on what is the role of government in a free society. Is it to take care of people, to provide for them? Is it to police the world? And I think that if government doesn't have the power to do good things for people, or to do bad things to people, the drug war, that most people aren't going to care who's in office. And the only reason really people care so much is because government has so much power over people, over our income, what deductions, tax credits, grants, projects in your community, jobs for your community. So there's a large special interest group that has a vested interest in like who's going to be elected and so forth. But if all of a sudden, notice that ministers, church ministers, you don't see them angsting over, who should we get elected and stuff like that. Why? Because they know that government can't give them any grants. They're just prohibited from giving the churches grants. Well, I think that would be the case if system-wide, if government couldn't do that anymore, people probably wouldn't care who's elected.
Thank you. I don't think, Mr. Rolfe, that you could answer this, because I don't think this applied in your time, but we're talking here about commodity markets. Should they be regulated by the government to ensure that prices are fixed by world supply, or should they be discovered by world supply and demand? Should we have the SEC, should we have the commodity trade boards and so on, or should there be a more open trading system rather than the government regulation?
Yeah, I think you know the answer, my answer to that
Sure.
question. It should be absolutely, totally open. I mean, the commodities market and every other market. A free market in money. Why do we have a central bank, a Federal Reserve System? Why not a free market in money? I mean, our ancestors made gold and silver coins legal tender. Imagine that. That was the official money of the United States. Not paper money. This notion that the gold standard was paper money backed by gold, that's mythical. Gold was the money. You carried coins around it because they feared government debasement. And so why not a free market there? Why not a free market in commodities? There's a great essay we published on our website at fff.org many years ago. It was a reprint from the Wall Street Journal called "The Speculator is Hero" by a man named Victor Niederhofer, who was a commodities broker. I think he might still be a speculator on Wall Street. I really advise to take a look at that article because you see the important role that the speculator plays in a free market society. And so, yeah, I say get rid of the SEC, get rid of all these things, free up the market everywhere.
Thank you. And our final question, I think both of you can address this. Should we not ask who regulates the regulators? How is it that they can be trusted when ordinary business persons can't?
Perhaps I should start with that. I have found that humans are humans, and all subject to the same flaws and virtues and strengths and weaknesses. It is that way with all. Captain John Smith, that was often regarded as a great leader, was arrogant and boastful. He was brilliant and experienced. He had strengths and weaknesses, and Captain John Smith was not good for all things, but good for some things. It is that way with all humans, and to put too much power in the hands of one person, a person who would have flaws, there's great danger in that.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I suspect it's got to come from one of Howard's students, based on how it's phrased. You know, what inevitably happens with these regulatory boards is they get captured by the companies that are being regulated. It always happens. They get their people, they've got the power, they've got the influence. And so what ends up happening is their cronies are on these boards, and they use this huge regulatory apparatus not to really protect the public, but to keep out competition from upstart businesses that can't meet the regulatory burden. And so it ends up being a protective device. And even worse than that, it lulls people into thinking that somebody's taking care of them. All of us are like this, that hey, if the government's regulating, I don't need to watch so carefully. I don't need to watch the bank. I got the FDIC there. I don't need to watch the food stuff because, man, they take care of the food. And then all of a sudden there's an outbreak of salmonella or something, and I'm sitting there saying, well, wait, or a big financial fraud taking place where you've got, Wall Street, where everybody loses their savings, and I'm sitting there saying, wait a minute, I thought we lived in a regulated society. I thought there wasn't going to be salmonella anymore, and wasn't going to be financial debacles where people are getting their money lost. And all those people trusted in the regulatory state. Well, if you had no regulations, people would be more self-reliant, more cautious, there would be certifying agencies that people would turn to. And you develop a more responsible citizenry rather than the kind of citizenry that says, I don't really need to check because the government's watching over me.
Thank you. We have one more guest here this evening who would like to address us, Mr. Dick Cheatham. Dick, would you take some time and address us?
I'm going to do a little magic and come into 2013. I'm not John Rolfe, I'm sorry about that. Thank you for the opportunity to be me. I agree with the comments that Jacob has made on all these points of view. And I have made note over my life that humans really are not different over time. They're, again, the flaws and virtues and strengths and weaknesses are classic, and you can see them right through time. In history, you can see certain classic successes and classic failures. The common storehouse that I talked about as John Rolfe, it fails over and over and over. And something that really might cause you to wonder about humans and why they don't pay attention. Jamestown was established in 1607. And unfortunately, most Americans think that America starts in 1620 when the Pilgrims landed Plymouth Rock. That was over 13 years later. that first permanent seed that became the USA was at Jamestown, not Plymouth. Well, Plymouth engaged in the same failures that had happened at Jamestown. They had a common storehouse situation, and they failed in the same way. Humans reacted in the very same way to the positive and negative incentives that were placed upon them. So the big question is, well, why did Plymouth have to go through that? Why did they have to have this pain? Well, it's because they didn't pay attention to what happened at Jamestown. They thought they could do it better. They thought this time the common storehouse would work. And it always fails, time after time after time. When you eliminate the classic human incentives and disincentives that come with life, when you try to protect people against those things, you get a warped and unproductive society. And sometimes not only warped and unproductive, but very, very harsh and even deadly. So anyway, I see these currents that run through history. People were no more virtuous or evil, no more intelligent or lacking intelligence. The only difference between now and any time before is simply the amount of knowledge that we have about science and technology, which changes moment to moment to moment. So these classic issues of freedom or lack of freedom, they don't apply to us now only, or people 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago. Freedom is a perpetual goal for humans. We all want it, we all will want it. It will be that way in 1,000 years. We're not going to be different in that way.
Thank you. Mr. Hornberger, do you have some closing comments that you'd like to make?
I don't think so.
No. Okay.
I want to thank y'all so much for your attention and listening and the questions. I don't know if many know this, because I don't know it came out in the introduction that Dick went to BMI. We were there at the same time. He was 2 classes ahead of me. And we've been talking about our experience there. And, so kind of an interesting situation. Thought I'd mention that.
We were just talking about the fact, I think Jacob brought it up, that we both lived in a tyranny and we decided we didn't like it.
As people sometimes ask me, how was your experience at BMI? You know, and I said, oh, it's great. That's where I learned all about socialism and fascism and the tyranny and the control and the regulation. And man, I don't like it.
Ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking Mr. Hornberger. Especially United Way of Yuma County and the Yuma Investment Group. Remember, the Yuma Investment Group has a table in the lobby. They'd love to talk to you about buying and selling gold and silver coins. As you exit, please check to see if you've purchased a raffle ticket. You may have a winning ticket, so please pick up your prizes. The gentleman will be out in the lobby, available to, you can have your picture taken with them. With Mr. John Rolfe, you can transport yourself back to the 1620s and take home a souvenir picture. Howard, do you have anything to add?
No, thank you very much for coming.
Okay. I'm supposed to say, please drive safely, and I'm sure you will. And you can turn your cell phones back on, including my wife. Good night and thank you.